Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. Just yesterday, the Republicans had a great debate, a grand debate on earmarks. When we were working in the Congress and working on the other side, that was a big debate, and I was sort of in the middle of it, but my position was sort of unique. It wasn't exactly in this category nor in this category. But anyway, it was very controversial. The Tea Party movement sort of built a reputation on opposition to earmarks. But yesterday, there was a discussion on that, and earmarks are perceived as, special interest spending, and you spend more money when you have earmarks, this sort of thing. So politically, it's been very popular to be opposed to earmarks. But back then, as I am now, I support the principle of earmarks. And a lot of people don't understand that because earmark sounds like, okay, you're earmarking something for this district and this district. Doesn't that create corruption and a lot of shortcomings? And it is true. But one thing, I'll start off with this. The one thing that a lot of people don't understand is if there is an appropriation for Ron Paul's congressional district to get $1 billion back of highway funds after Texas has sent $2 billion up there, that, if we can cut that earmark, we're going to save $1 billion. Doesn't quite work that way, does it?
No, the money is still spent. It's just that you don't get to bring any of it back home.
Who gets in charge of this money then?
The president, the executive branch.
The executive branch. And, it reminds me of what Article 1, Section 1 says, right at the top of the Constitution. All legislative powers herein shall be rested in the Congress.
Yes.
But of course, and that to me is the issue here, that I always defended the principle and the responsibility on Congress to spend the money. As a matter of fact, I think they should earmark everything. More earmarks, not less. Well, how are you going to spend this money? But to turn this money over to the executive branch, it becomes a political football. People argue, no, now it's a political football. You have to know who the chairman is, and if you're an independent like Ron Paul was, you're not going to get any of the money back, so we don't like that. We want to be able to work with the administrators, the various agencies, or get to know the president, and then we're going to get more of our money back. But on principle, I think it doesn't save money, like you say, by getting rid of earmarks, and it doesn't make it non-political. It sort of, in a way, drives the politics into more secrecy, because if I have an earmark up there, they see it, and they say, well, we have to cut it because he didn't vote a certain way. So I think it doesn't even give us more transparency by not having earmarks.
Yeah, and they'll always cite the outrageous examples as a reason why we shouldn't have them, when in fact those are actually the reasons we should. The bridge to nowhere is a big one. Duke Cunningham down in California got into some trouble for earmarking, for corruption about it. But we found out about those. So the outrageous things, the press will shine a light on if it's doing its job, and the people will respond to it.
But, the definition of earmarks is very diverse. It depends on what you're looking for. But with getting rid of the earmarks, did it get rid of the earmarks on how they build and spend money in the military-industrial complex? And there, you don't even have to build anything. You can spend billions of dollars on a weapon that they know from the beginning they don't need or want, and then they just waste it. And yet that is an earmark. It's built in this district, and this district. So if you did away with if we knew more about that, but they don't get rid of that. That's okay. As a matter of fact, there are some people who think that we should move gently back to earmarking, and that's one of the things that they want to do, give certain departments like Department of Homeland Security and DOD the right to earmark, and then the people who have political clout, will get more of the money. And if you're a chairman of the committee, then that happens. But I guess what Ryan thought yesterday was maybe we're not quite ready, because I don't think he is an absolute fiscal conservative. I don't think that was the reason he did that.
Well, as you point out, it was all smoke and mirrors back in 2010 when they did away with them. The Tea Party movement was rising, and they, I think, incorrectly identified earmarks as one of the key corrupt points that they needed to fight. And I remember having a lot of heated calls coming in, Ron Paul supports earmarks. They were furious. But so I think Boehner wanted to do something that looked like he was doing something, that looked good to appease this movement, which was a real kind of populist style movement, but that didn't really have any effect. And it's like everything else they did. What about the sequester on military spending? That didn't cut spending. It reduced the level of increase. So it looked good. But after they got rid of earmarks, as you point out, did spending go down a penny? No, it went up.
No, and the earmarking, as you say, just doesn't work. And I think what it does, it distracts from the real problem. They talk about the earmarks, whether you should have them or not, and the people who like earmarks, oh, well, the Constitution, like I just quoted, says the Congress should do that because they think they have more control there. The one thing that was never in debate, except when a couple of us would bring it up, and it's not in this current debate, is the real issue is spending. And how do you do it? They steal the money from us. They steal it from the public. They send all the money to Washington, and everybody gets bits and pieces back. Some get more than others. But the real problem is the money. It's the looting. It's the fact that the money goes to Washington. So if you stand on the basic constitutional principle of saying that earmarking, the principle is okay, but the problem is the spending, and they don't deal with that. And what you need to do, of course, is reduce the size and scope of government so that they don't have this, and then there's no fight over who gets to do the earmarking. Should it be the more proper unit of government, the Congress, are supposed to designate how the spending is going to occur, or should it be the secrecy of the executive branch, where the president has the ultimate veto? If you oppose the president's wars overseas, and then they're in charge of putting money into the various districts, they're not bashful in punishing people. So then all of a sudden, the president can punish. But how about, do you think it's conceivable, you got a little bit of experience of it, do you think it's conceivable that some of the punishment could come from a bureaucrat? And the bureaucrat might be in a position to do this to an individual congressman?
Sure, absolutely. They have all the power, and they're not accountable to the population, not accountable to the voter. If the voter sees that Duke Cunningham or someone else is doing some things that are really not in the interest of the district, they have the option, the ability every 2 years to vote him out or to call him and yell at him like they did at us quite often.
Yeah. No. I don't know how this will pan out. I think the dust will settle. It'll come back, and they may bring it back in. But I predict, with what we've already stated, it's not going to accomplish anything. It's not going to ever find a fair and equitable way of distributing stolen goods. It's the people who are in power, and they'll do anything they can. So the special interests are going to be out there, like foreign aid. Foreign aid is an earmark because the money goes to foreign governments. Sometimes foreign aid never even leaves this country. It goes from the people to the Congress to some industry here that's selling some goods that we designated that that they get some airplanes or something like that. So it doesn't work at all, and unfortunately. There's a lot of misunderstanding on this, and I think my goal is try to, I don't have to be defensive, never had to be defensive, but it is one thing that there were a lot of conservatives and libertarians who say, oh no, earmarking is bad, and they didn't quite understand that the process was one thing, the spending was another thing, and how can you find the proper way of passing out these stolen goods?
Well, how did you used to do it when you were in Congress when we still had earmarking?
Yeah, well, in a way, it precipitated a few phone calls with you and others have had to take, and I would say that if somebody in my district called, and I'm their legitimate representatives for all kinds of complaints with the federal government, whether it's overregulation or whatever, I felt a responsibility. But if they would come and say that, we like this project, I I would just do a routine, addition to it and request it. But because all these bills were too big, I'd vote against the bill. And then people would say, well, that's inconsistent. Oh, you want the credit for doing this, but not the punishment for spending it. Well, in a way, it worked out that way, but it was a very definite dedication to endorsing a principle and opposing, the spending. And some people were happy with that, and it never seemed to hurt me long term, politically, because people figured that I had a reason for it, or they'd excuse me, or something like that.
Well, here again, we can also blame the media for the way they frame things. And here's what I think it was Politico. I was looking up an article about what happened yesterday, and they call earmarking, quote, designating money for pet projects back home. And that just makes it, the spin makes it sound awful.
Right.
Where it's not necessarily the case because the principle is different than the practice.
Yeah, and they do that purposely, and they might do it more in one district than another, to embarrass people. But they never address the real problem. And that is big government, big spending, the role of government, why are they so involved? And even the military spending, we're opposed to just military spending. We want defense spending, and then they should do whatever is necessary for the national defense. We shouldn't, take an airplane and build it in 50 different states, for political reasons. They should do it. But they've lost the concept of that. So it sort of goes over the head of a lot of voters, and it's easy to demagogue this issue and say that, if he voted for an earmark or something like that, but and this whole thing there's no way this should be interpreted of our defending the bad guys, because the bad spending you've mentioned already can be just as bad when somebody does it secretly, and the money is going to be wasted.
One of the things when we had a lot of calls like this, the one thing that surprised people the most when we explained it to them and they said, I had no idea that was the case, we simply told them, you know what? If every earmark was struck from this bill, as you said, the spending would be exactly the same as it was before. And they just stopped and said, really?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that goes by. And even yesterday, I didn't hear that argument that it doesn't cut any spending whatsoever. And of course, that's where we should be. But it sounds like that if you cut $1 million or $500 million out of somebody's special designation, that all of a sudden that's going to shrink. And we used to try to get an amendment that the money would be used to cut back on the deficit, but they never passed. So it was pretty convenient for them to play these games.
It'll be interesting to see if they come back.
I think they'll come back again on these earmarks. If not, the status quo isn't any good. What I want them to do, and which I don't believe we heard or had a result, with this election, there was no serious talk about they're spending too much money. There was so much agreement on expanding the spending, and if you spend it on infrastructure, can you imagine how many special interests are going to get to build the infrastructures? Who's going to this? They'll all be political, distribution of funds. It won't be, if you're a businessman building a building, you might pick the best builder, even if you have to deal with the politics of the particular cities and all. But no, it's going to be a lot more spending, and earmarks will not be a solution. You're going to hear more talk about it. But unfortunately, I think we're locked in place with more spending and more inflation. The signs are here. Bond price, interest rates are now already going up. I think there are signs that price inflation will be back with us soon. Under those circumstances, I will still stay in business because we're going to keep talking about why we need a much smaller government, why we have less taxes and less regulations, and we'd like to make the principle of earmarks incidental and irrelevant and has no meaning, because it's sort of, I like to compare this to tax credits in a way. You give a tax credit to a group, and but it's a special deal for that group. Well, I voted for all tax credits, even though it wasn't the best way to do it, because everybody should get the same tax credit. So and that's the way some of these earmarks work. So if you have the tax credits, if it's good for one group, or tax abatement, if it's good for one group, just give it to everybody, because it's good for the economy. And that's what would happen in a free market society, in a government that's dedicated to liberty and sound money. It would happen, and there'd be so many more improvements. And guess what? The standard of living would go up, and the number of people unemployed in the labor force, that eventually would go down, and we would have fuller employment. Of course, that's what we hope for, because we work for peace and prosperity, and that is our goal. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.